All right, let's do the next problem here. Notice this is subtraction, so in my head, I'm thinking to myself that I need a lowest common denominator in order to combine two fractions. I'm looking at the denominator and I say, oh snaps, x minus 3, 5x minus 15 are not the same denominators, so that means I gotta do work. I need to find the lowest common denominator. So how do you find the lowest common denominator when it looks like this? And this is where the new thing comes along. The lowest common denominator we mentioned earlier can be considered as the lowest common multiple. But how do you find the lowest common multiple of polynomials? So another way of thinking of the lowest common denominator, it is the product of unique factors. So again, that factor word keeps showing up, of unique factors in the denominator. So it's the product of unique factors in the denominator. Very important words, product of unique factors in the denominator. So let's unpack what that means. So right now I see the word factors in the denominator. So I know I need to factor the denominator. So x minus 3, can I factor x minus 3? No. 5x minus 15, can I factor 5x minus 15? I sure can. 5x minus 15, I could pull out the greatest common factor, which is going to be a 5. So when I pull out the greatest common factor, I end up getting 5 in the denominator, and then inside I have x minus 3. So 5x minus 15 is that. Okay, so here I'm just rewriting everything. So now I've factored the denominator. All right. So now this LCD is the product of unique factors in the denominator. So the LCD in this problem is going to be the product of unique factors. So what are factors in the denominator? Well, we said x minus 3 is a factor, right? You can't factor that anymore. So this in and of itself is a factor. So x minus 3 is a factor. 5 is a factor because it's being multiplied by this. And then x minus 3 again is another factor. However, notice that the word says the product of unique. So unique means that it only shows up once. So since x minus 3 already showed up as a factor here, I don't have to write x minus 3 again. It already showed up here. I don't need to write it again. So it's just 5 times x minus 3. So that is the lowest common denominator based on this definition that the LCD is the product of unique factors in the denominator. So now what do? Well, just like the problem we just did earlier, or about adding and subtracting fractions, you rewrite the problem, you rewrite the fractions with the lowest common denominator, right? So now I'm going to rewrite this. So rewrite the rationals with the LCD. So you're going to rewrite it with the LCD. So here, the denominator here is going to be 5 times x minus 3 minus 5 times x minus 3, because that's the LCD. So now I'm going to change this fraction to its equivalent fraction where it has the lowest common denominator. And again, just like how we did here, to go from the old fraction to the new fraction, we ask ourselves, what do we need to multiply by? And whatever we multiply by, whatever you do the bottom, you must do the top, because that's math. You always have to keep things fair and balanced. So to go from x minus 3 to 5 times x minus 3, I need to multiply by 5, right? So I needed to multiply by 5. 5 times this whole thing will give me the denominator. So whatever I do in bottom, I must do to the top. So 5 times this whole thing. So I'm going to put this in parentheses to emphasize that I need to distribute the 5 through. So when I distribute the 5 through, I get 5x minus 5. To go from the old fraction to the new fraction, well, what do you know? It's already 5 times x minus 3. So I don't have to change anything. I just keep it as is, right? So this is a little bit less work for me because it was already the same. Now that I have the lowest common denominator, now I can combine the fractions. Now I can subtract them because I have the lowest common denominator. Just like this problem here, once you have the lowest common denominator, you can add or subtract the numerators. So here, when I combine the fractions, I have 5 times x minus 3 in the denominator. The numerator, I have 5x minus 5 minus, and I'm going to do something incorrect, and I want you to catch it, minus 2x plus 4. I'll give you a second to see what in the world did Professor Mahan do incorrect. Hope you guys caught it. The minus sign is outside of this whole fraction, so the minus sign is applied to everything here, so I need to actually distribute the minus sign through. So minus, this 2x becomes a negative 2x, and this positive 4 should become a negative 4. So you need to distribute the negative sign in order to have the correct answer. So here, I did that. And just to remind you of the previous problem where we had the minus sign here, minus 3, it was only just one number here, so we didn't have to distribute it through to anything. We just applied it to the 3, so it became a negative 3. But here in this problem, since there's 2 terms, you need to distribute it through to both of those terms. All right, so now that I have that, before we try to cancel anything, let's just look at the numerator and let's simplify the numerator. Can I combine any of these terms? Are any of them like terms or like animals, as we would say in class? 5x minus 2x will give me 3x. Negative 5 minus 4 will give me negative 9. In the bottom here, I have 5 times x minus 3. Phew, all that work, and we think we're done, right? We think we're done, but no, no, no. Do not think you're done yet, because whenever you end up with a fraction, make sure your fraction is in lowest simplified term. So I look at the top and I ask myself, can I factor it? So the next part is simplify the fraction by factoring. So again, factoring comes up again. Did I not mention that factoring is so important? So here, 3x minus 9, can I factor that? I sure can. I could pull out the 3, which is the greatest common factor, and inside I have x minus 3, because 3x minus 9. In the bottom here, I have 5 times x minus 3. Factor, 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 factor. Are there any common factors in this answer? X minus 3, x minus 3. X minus 3 divided by x minus 3 will just give me 1. So therefore, my answer is, sorry about this part, my answer is 3 over 5. Isn't that beautiful? Something that started off so messy becomes so pretty at the end. Hence the beauty of math.